Now, an Islamic Center labelled the nerve centre of Iran in the UK is said to have received £240,000 in government COVID payments, despite having a reserve of over £4 million.
Yes, the payments were revealed by the think tank Policy Exchange, who had called for a ban on visas being issued for Iranian nationals to work at this very centre. The report said that all four of the directors of the centre since 1994 had been named as representatives in the UK for Iran's supreme leader, with the centre holding frequent events to mark the 1979 Islamic Revolution.
Really, really shocking stuff. But we can now speak to GBNews reporter Charlie Peters for more on this story. And Charlie, it just beggars belief. Taxpayers' money was going to this.
Well, the Islamic Center for England occupies a former cinema in Maida Vale, the leafy West London suburb. And in that building, it has hosted several events to commemorate the 1979 Islamic Revolution of Iran. And the stated aims of the charity are to promote the tenets and the values of Shia Islam. But at the same time, it does stand accused today of being a nerve centre for promoting the political and religious demands and desires of the Iranian regime. And this report from the think tank Policy Exchange has pointed in particular to an event in January 2020 after the assassination by then-President Donald Trump of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps commander Qasem Soleimani. The general was struck by a drone in Baghdad in Iraq, and they reacted by describing him as a great martyr. That's what the director of this charity said at the time. Now, £240,000 of taxpayers' cash has arrived to the charity since. These were made during the COVID-19 pandemic in two separate payments, £109,000 as part of the furlough scheme job retention approach, and then another £120,000 in 2021. Of course, that scheme was rolled out very quickly by the Treasury to ensure that job losses were not significant, and there were not, as many critics have said, significant checks and balances conducted at the time. They just wanted to get the money out to keep those charities and those jobs safe. Now, the reaction has been pretty stark to those claims, at least in part because in 2022, the Charity Commission did eventually launch a statutory inquiry into that event in January 2020, when it did commemorate the death of Qasem Soleimani. Now, that is just a small part of this report from Policy Exchange, because it looks at a much wider set of concerns around how Tehran projects itself in Britain. And it points to this Islamic Center for England as the nerve center of a much wider informal nexus of groups that coalesce to promote the ideals of the regime.
And we know there have been many warnings from the police and counter-terrorism towards Iranian dissidents living in London and in other parts of the UK, that they could be at heightened risk of kidnap and other threats.
That's right, and even some reporters from an Iran-linked TV channel in Britain have also faced several of those threats. In West London, we have seen armed police presence covering TV studios in that location. And one of the things that Policy Exchange has pointed out in its report today is that MI5, the security services, have not described their counter-subversion measures in great detail. It pointed to a previous statement on the security services website saying that they no longer conduct counter-subversion activities. This is one of the roles and responsibilities of the security services. They deal in espionage and dealing with terror threats, but also subversion, the more menacing undercurrent to destabilize a wider society. This was a popular strategy for the security services during the Cold War, when Russian subversion was key. And I think what many of the analysts involved in this Policy Exchange report are pointing out today is that a new threat has arisen. It's almost snuck into Britain through many of these groups, and is now, they claim, coalescing and acting again to push forward pro-Iranian messages.
Hugely shocking story, and couldn't be more timely given what is going on now between Iran and the rest of the Middle East and indeed the United Kingdom. But Charlie Peters, thank you very much for bringing us all the details.
Yes, as if you didn't have enough to worry about. Thank you very much indeed, Charlie Peters. That's it from us today.